Welcome to Current Conflicts, a channel where we discuss the strategic, operational, and most importantly, logistical aspects of the ongoing conflicts in our ever more difficult and dangerous world. Today we're going to talk about China.
Let's say China.
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 China. China.
China.
Okay, enough of that. What we're really going to talk about is a Chinese amphibious invasion of Taiwan, the equipment that they would need to set it up, and any historical analogies we might have that would give us a better understanding of what it would realistically take for them to set it up and move all that material from one place to another over contested oceans. So let's talk about France, Mulberry Harbors, the Normandy invasion, and everything that goes along with it. This is an image of the Normandy invasion, just so we can get some scale. Pretty much the entire southern coast of the United Kingdom has ports and a lot of shipping's moving across the channel. They're concentrating in a small place and then moving across the channel into these Mulberry Harbors to get ready to offload all the material you need for war. Troops, troop transports, ammunition, armored vehicles, more troops. The initial D-Day landings were just a very small portion of the overall amount of troops and material that needed to come over. It's hundreds and thousands of tons of shipping that needed to be moved across the channel. Not only that, they were so concerned about the amount of fuel they were going to need that they actually ran a pipeline across the channel to ensure that they didn't have to move it across by ship. So it's an enormous amount of material that needs to come over. Now, granted, Taiwan is not as big as Europe. They're not going to need to move quite as much stuff. But the estimates I've seen say about 300,000 Chinese troops are going to be needed to move across the channel. And you can only imagine the scale of stuff that you would need to support 300,000 troops on the offensive in combat. It's an enormous amount of stuff. So let's keep going. Now, you might be asking yourself, what's a Mulberry Harbor? Well, this is a Mulberry Harbor. Essentially, it was a harbor that they built in the United Kingdom and then towed across the channel to set up on the beaches. They were concerned that it would take too long or they might not be able to secure an actual port and port facilities, so they brought one with them. This is kind of an overhead view of what that would look like and how they plan to get it all set up. Okay, here is an overhead image of the diagram I just showed you, so you can see what it looks like sort of in person, right? This is aerial photography. You can see all around the harbor the ships getting ready to come in. You can see them running up to the beaches. You can see the caissons out there that they have to kind of keep the rough seas away from the piers and the pontoons and everything you need to start unloading off the ships and onto the beach. These next two images are for scale, and so we can kind of put ourselves in the mind of these men who were there on the beach. I mean, imagine you're trying to unload ships onto a rough sandy beach, and they're doing this under fire. Like, doing this, just doing this is difficult enough. Imagine you got artillery coming in, aerial bombardment. It's tough. It's a tough ask. So let's just think about that. Think about how difficult it was just to get these things set up and how we would react to being in that position. All right, so in a video about China and Taiwan, we're finally going to talk about China and Taiwan. You can see here sort of the same kind of images that I showed you at the beginning. This is a lot of ocean. There's a lot of ocean to cross. And the Chinese are going to face a lot of the same problems that the Allies faced when they try to cross over the English Channel. Now, granted, this isn't quite as big as the English Channel, but the Chinese are going to struggle with air superiority and naval superiority. There's going to be a lot of ordnance flying both ways, and this is not going to be nearly as secure as the Allies were able to make the English Channel. So, something to think about. Here is an image of Taiwan that is showing the so-called red beaches. These are the best beaches that have been identified for an amphibious landing. Most of the west coast of the island is mountainous, and it's just really not conducive to to any kind of amphibious landing. Pretty much all the best beaches are way down in the south or way up in the north where Taipei is. Now, unlike Normandy, where essentially the Allies tricked the Axis powers into not knowing where they were going to land, everybody knows where these beaches are. These are highly fortified, much more fortified than the Normandy beaches were, and it's going to be extremely difficult to get any kind of amphibious assault ships up close to and onto these beaches. Like, much more difficult than what the Allies had to face. If you've seen Saving Private Ryan, you know what it's like, or you have an idea of what it would be like to assault a beach. That was in World War II. Imagine now with just the level and sophistication of the weaponry is just so much more now. It'd be so much more difficult now. Here we have an image of a Chinese Type 75 amphibious assault ship. You can see the back opens up. You can roll this right up to the beach and unload your troops from the bay back there. It also carries helicopters to allow you to move troops by helicopter from the ship to the shore. These are very heavily based on the American amphibious assault ships. The problem the Chinese have is they don't have a lot of these. They don't have nearly enough to move the amount of troops that they would need to seize and hold territory in Taiwan, in particular while they're under fire. So that's a big problem for the Chinese. And how are the Chinese going to solve that problem? Well, the quick answer to that is ro-ro ferries. So let's talk about ro-ro ferries. What is a ro-ro ferry, you might ask? A ro-ro ferry is a roll-on, roll-off ferry. Now, the Chinese are building these as civilian vessels. They're supposed to be used for things like cars, electric cars, trailers, trucks, anything that you can drive onto the ship and then drive back off. Roll on, roll off. The Chinese are not only using these for civilian equipment. This is dual-use equipment the Chinese are building as civilian equipment, but the next few images I'm going to show you show very clearly that these are very capable of being used for military purposes. In these next images, you can see Chinese military equipment, namely armored vehicles, being loaded onto these so-called civilian ferries. Most civilian ferries are not designed to be able to move heavy military equipment on and off. Most civilian ferries are designed for cars, maybe trucks, nothing that weighs as much as heavy armor. So these are dual use, right? Yes, they are civilian ferries, and yes, you can put cars and trucks and trailers and all the normal civilian things that you would move on a ro-ro ferry typically. But these have clearly been designed to also be able to do heavy sea lift of armored vehicles. So not only have the Chinese built these ferries with military use in mind, but you can see from these images that they're actually doing exercises unloading the amphibious assault vehicles from these civilian ferries. This image is from H.I. Sutton. He has an excellent YouTube channel on naval defense issues. A lot of the research from this was done using a lot of materials from him. So shout out to H.I. Sutton. Check out his YouTube channel if you haven't seen it already. Now, the newest and arguably most disturbing development in this whole saga is these amphibious docks that the Chinese are building. You can see this is a satellite image from the 8th of January, 2025. So this is very, very recent, a very, very recent and disturbing development. These amphibious docks don't need to roll right up to the shore the way these ro-ro ferries would need to. These can be positioned a little bit further away from the shore and act as a mulberry pier, very much in the same way that the Allies did in World War II. In Normandy, the Chinese are now developing technologies to allow them to do the same kind of thing. This image shows how the Chinese Navy would try to put it all together. You can see in the upper part of the image the carrier battle group trying to establish air dominance, air superiority, keep that shipping lane open, keep aircraft, ships, submarines away from their logistical train. And you can see where these mobile docks would roll pretty close up to the shore, use that bridge they've got on the front, and then deploy their armored vehicles. And then the ro-ro ferries could roll up, unload onto this mobile dock, and then from the dock onto the shore. This is going to allow them to bypass a lot of the ideal beaches and set up logistics in sort of unexpected and unprepared places. So this is bad, right? This is a bad development. This sort of negates a lot of the preparation that the Taiwanese have done and allows the Chinese to move into places that a lot of people thought they wouldn't be able to go initially. Now, these last couple images are from the Ukraine war, pretty early in the Ukraine war. These are images of a stopped amphibious crossing by the Russian army. The Ukrainians stopped them there on the beach of the river. You can see all kinds of armored vehicles just blown apart. The reason I have these images here is to demonstrate that it's extremely difficult to effect a contested crossing. It's one of the most difficult things a military can do. The Russians have had a hard time doing this with rivers. We don't know how good the Chinese military is. We haven't really seen them in combat in a long time, but it's not hopeless. It's not a hopeless defense. The Taiwanese are not in a state of hopelessness. Like, they do have the possibility to repel an invasion. And so I just put these images up to show that it's tough. It's tricky. The Russians haven't been able to cross a river, a contested river, almost at all during the Ukraine war. So this just shows the difficulty of that sort of thing. Yeah, amphibious assaults are hard. It's a hard thing to do, especially when there's a lot of ordnance flying both ways. So it's a tough situation. It's going to be tough on both sides, and if the Chinese do decide to go for it, that's almost certainly going to bring the United States into the conflict, which could escalate very, very quickly. So it's something to keep an eye on. Hopefully this gives you a better idea of the type of preparatory work that they would need to do. And all this stuff is going to be visible by satellite. We're going to see it coming, very much like we saw Russia setting up in Belarus and along the Russian border right before they went into Ukraine. It was pretty obvious what they were going to do. So we should have a pretty good idea of what the Chinese are going to do if they're going to do this. But yeah. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you liked what I did, hit the like button. If you didn't like what I did, hit the dislike button. If you want to see more of this type of video, go ahead and subscribe. And it's a dangerous world. Y'all stay safe out there.